For a game so concerned with the perils of futurism, it's ironic that Prey feels like it's trapped in the past. It takes inspiration from immersive sims like System Shock, Deus Ex, and Bioshock, but while these titles take ideas underpinning the genre and push them forward, Prey's humdrum execution of the fundamentals leave it feeling stuck in time. Set in the year 2025, Prey casts players as Morgan Yu, a scientist that finds herself, or himself, trapped on Talos 1, a space station overrun by a race of highly intelligent aliens called the Typhon. Prey's opening is its most memorable part, largely due to its own "would you kindly" moment and the promise of what it could mean. Prey's early game twist lays the groundwork for players to scrutinize their agency, question the motivations of characters, and re-evaluate the impact they're having. It's an opportunity to tell a twisting, paranoia-filled story that forces you to second-guess your own character. But that opportunity is largely wasted. Prey quickly loosens its grip on this narrative thread, allowing it to drift into the background in favor of environmental storytelling that shifts the focus to Talos 1 itself. With its fusion of Art Deco stylings and practical design, Talos 1 is initially very striking, but its consistent aesthetic throughout is broken only by one standout area. Otherwise, the place is comprised of typical living quarters, office areas, and science labs. Logically, I can appreciate that the lack of variety makes sense. It's an institution designed to house people that do science, not a fun fair. Nevertheless, the lack of variety doesn't provide much incentive to stop and admire your surroundings beyond the initial few hours. Good immersive sims like Bioshock and Dishonored weave stories into their environments, telling micro-stories in the process. But in Prey, those stories are limited to the uninteresting. A space station ruined by a catastrophic event and the hubris of its leaders is evocative in itself, but Prey never colours in the outline of these events, making the world feel like it lacks depth. Smaller tales involving the people station on Talos 1 can be found by reading emails at computer terminals, and although they provide a little more to latch onto, by and large it's all fairly forgettable. There's the occasional meaningful exchange, but the abundance of mundane notes between colleagues makes reading them a chore, and overall they feel like filler for an overarching narrative that's stretched thin. A key part of Prey's story involves presenting conflicting evidence about Morgan's personality before the memory loss, specifically her intent for Talos 1 and her contingency for a Typhon outbreak. The game wants you to define your Morgan, but it only serves up a handful of moments to invite you to do so. These come in the form of uninspired missions for characters who come off as distractions from the main narrative instead of pivotal figures in the story. Prey makes an honest effort of raising the profile of these people, but it happens late in the game, and when all said and done, the characters didn't really speak to me. There's a restraint to Prey that creates a disquieting quality in Talos 1, but when this philosophy is extended to its characters, it just makes them fade away. Who can be blamed for thinking about ignoring a guy that wants you to go out of your way to fetch a personal artifact, or a lady who asks you to spend precious resources in battling Typhon to grab her some medicine? It turns out, however, these menial tasks are critical to the ending, and when the game laid out the unexpected way it's all tied together, the revelation didn't feel earned. Prey does occasionally deliver an engaging mission, but they're few and far in between. Prey's gameplay experience fares better, but it's uneven, and at times, the systems feel at odds with themselves. With limited access to weapons and special abilities, much of the early game feels like a slog. It's like the worst parts of a survival horror, a punishing war of attrition, but without the cycle of tension and release that makes it enjoyable. This becomes more pronounced when you consider that mimics, the most prevalent type of Typhon enemy in the early stages, have a tendency of appearing in blind spots and catching you off guard. This aspect of the game is both exhilarating and infuriating. The mimics are small, highly mobile creatures that can shapeshift into innocuous objects around them. While this was effective in creating tension, I felt that it also detracted from exploration. I wasn't soaking in the atmosphere as much as I was painstakingly scouring it to find that mimic before it chips away at my health. And when I took on the mimic, the lethargic controls of gunplay coupled with the small black spider darting around the floor of a dimly lit room and leaping off walls made me feel more like Mr. Bean. I also felt forced to play conservatively for most of the game. The scarcity of health packs and ammunition meant it was in my best interest to sneak by enemies, which goes against Prey's claim that you can play your way, and became frustrating when enemies swarmed around objectives. As the game progresses, however, neuromods become more abundant, which in turn means that you can unlock abilities that level the playing field somewhat. This is when Prey's combat opens up, and while it doesn't provide as much room for creativity as Dishonored 2, weapon and ability combinations develop a satisfying synergy. Some powers allow you to take control of enemies to fight alongside you for a short period of time, or teleport you short distances to get the jump on enemies. As new foes are introduced, it becomes imperative to use the psychoscope, a helmet with a scanner on it, to research the Typhon and reveal their individual weaknesses, while also unearthing more abilities to unlock. The downside of using alien powers is that turrets littered around Talos 1 identify you as being part Typhon and open fire on you. Again, early on this feels like punishment for trying to explore the more interesting wrinkles of combat, but with time, turrets also become less of an issue as they can be hacked or easily destroyed.
Suit integrity damaged.
In its later stages, Prey's combat feels varied and strategic. You also gain the ability to break down and reassemble junk into useful items ranging from weaponry and neuromod upgrades to turrets and medpacks. Having this ability eased the lack of resources and empowered me to really approach combat and exploration how I wanted. I could go into any scenario feeling like I had a decent shot of defeating the Typhon and achieving my objective. Neuromods can also be used to solve Prey's puzzles, which mostly involve figuring out how to gain entry into inaccessible locations. While not challenging, these puzzles shine a spotlight on the layout of Talos by allowing you a degree of freedom in how you approach them. On a small scale, looping vents, multi-layered rooms, and gravity lifts that act as arteries throughout the station show consideration has been given to the physical construction of Talos 1. The glue cannon is particularly effective in showing how Prey's environments can fold in on themselves. Its foam can be launched at walls, and when it hardens, Morgan can use it as a makeshift platform. This makes it possible to circumvent the obvious path in favor of a more diverse approach, highlighting the thoughtful level design. Unfortunately, I encountered a number of technical issues with Prey in my playthrough, the most severe of which prevented quest progression entirely. These had to be resolved by loading an earlier save, which meant losing some progress. Prey also suffers from lengthy load times when moving between areas, and characters frequently clip through walls, resulting in an overall experience that feels rough. Prey is a game of uneven pacing and uninteresting characters. It opens with a poignant, thought-provoking premises, but fails to follow through until the end, when it claims a revelation it doesn't quite earn. Its gameplay falters out of the gate, but eventually matures into something worthwhile, if a bit familiar. As an homage to System Shock, it's competent, and at times even enjoyable. However, Prey fails to distinguish itself, and next to immersive sim contemporaries such as Dishonored, it feels stagnant.